Imagine standing in an arena built for 50,000 souls, the sun blinding. The crowd chanting a single word, blood. Beside you, a man's chains are unshackled, not to free him, but to feed him to the sand. In moments, his screams will rise, swallowed by applause. What your history books told you about gladiators was only half the truth. The other half was far darker. These were not games. They were executions, massacres, and myths brought to life through death. Welcome to ancient Rome's deadliest arena, games you were never taught in school. The roar of the Colosseum shakes the very stone beneath your feet. Tens of thousands of voices merge into one deafening demand, blood. A condemned man trembles at the center of the arena. His chains have been removed, but not his fear. The sunlight blinds him, and the sand feels soft on his bare feet. Soon it will be soaked red. He lifts his head toward the imperial box, waiting for the signal. For him, mercy is a myth. This was not simply a fight. This was theater, ritual, and execution all in one. The Colosseum was the beating heart of Rome's cruelty, a monument not just to architecture, but to control. It was where emperors reminded the people who held the power, and where the crowd surrendered to spectacle. Imagine being among them. The smell of sweat, dust, and iron fills the air. Some cheer wildly. Others whisper, eyes fixed on the trembling figures below. Rumors spread that today's games will be unlike any before, that the blood to be spilled was not mere entertainment, but a warning. The signal is given. The first blade flashes. The first scream cuts through the air, silenced only by the thunder of applause. The condemned man collapses, his body contorted on the sand. And for the Romans watching, this was only the opening act. Before the truth of these games can be uncovered, we must understand the rulers who fed them, the emperors who demanded more blood with every passing year. The emperor rises from his seat. The crowd falls silent, their eyes fixed upon him. He raises his hand, and in an instant the games are his. Rome was not ruled by swords alone, but by spectacle. Politicians gave speeches, armies fought wars, but emperors won loyalty with bread and circuses. And no circus was grander than the arena. Augustus, the first emperor, perfected the art of control. He gave the people peace and prosperity, but also games, hundreds of them. Every victory in war, every triumph at home, was celebrated with blood on the sand. But as decades passed, rulers grew darker. Nero was said to revel in the sight of cruelty, using the games to mock his enemies and terrify the elite. Some whispered he forced men to die in grotesque displays, their screams echoing to the stone walls of the amphitheater. Then came Commodus, the emperor who believed he was not just ruler, but gladiator. He entered the arena himself, dressed in gleaming armor, wielding a sword against men who were never allowed to strike back. To the crowd, it was thrilling. To history, it was a scandal. The line between ruler and spectacle blurred, and Rome itself seemed to teeter on the edge of madness. Each emperor raised the stakes. Each demanded games more extravagant, more shocking, more cruel. It was not enough to watch men fight. It had to be myth theater, slaughter on a scale the world had never known. The Colosseum was no longer just a stage. It was propaganda carved in stone. It told every citizen, Rome is eternal. Rome is powerful. Rome will feed you entertainment, even if it must feed on the blood of thousands. And yet, not all victims were gladiators. Some were chosen for roles far stranger and far more terrifying. The curtain rises, not on a play, but on an execution. A man dressed as Icarus is strapped into a contraption meant to mimic wings. The crowd laughs as he is launched skyward. For a fleeting second, he soars. Then the wings fail and he plummets. His bones shatter on the sand below, and the audience erupts not in horror, but delight. This was Rome's theater of death. Mythological plays where the actors were prisoners, and the ending was always real. To reenact Prometheus, a man was chained and torn apart by birds. To become Hercules, another was burned alive, flames consuming his flesh while the crowd cheered the legend. Whispers spread of even more grotesque scenes. Men thrown to wild beast dresses or Orion's prey. Women cast as maidens in tragic tales. Their fates sealed before the first act began. Imagine sitting in that crowd. You know the play, you know the legend, and you know how it must end. You watch, not for suspense, but for the horror of reality colliding with myth. Some claimed this was art. Others whispered it was madness. But to the emperors, it was power, the ability to turn human lives into disposable theater. These spectacles lingered in memory, retold as rumors, half legend, half truth. And yet, even in the shadow of myth, the beast of the arena would soon command the stage. The horns blare. A gate creaks open. From the darkness emerges a tiger, its eyes fixed on a chained man who cannot move. The crowd roars as predator meets prey. Rome's appetite for spectacle demanded more than men. It demanded nature itself. Across the empire, hunters scoured deserts and jungles, dragging back lions, elephants, crocodiles, and bears. To parade such beasts in Rome was to prove the empire's reach. To slaughter them was to prove its dominion. The Venetians' beast hunts were savage displays. Skilled hunters known as venators fought against wild animals in stage battles. But often, unarmed prisoners were cast into the arena, left to be torn apart while the audience cheered. Emperors competed to outdo one another. Thousands of animals could be killed in a single day. Some whispered that whole species disappeared from distant lands. Sacrifice for Rome's hunger for entertainment. The sand grew thick with fur, blood, and bone. The stench of death hung in the air. To many Romans, it was thrilling. To others, it was proof that the empire itself was devouring the world. But the animals were only part of the spectacle. For the true stars of the arena, the gladiators, the stage was far crueler. In the dim light of the gladiator school, a man sharpens his blade. He knows tomorrow may be his last. Around him, others stretch, whisper, or pray. Few will survive long enough to see freedom. Gladiators were not heroes. They were slaves, prisoners, men forced into combat for the amusement of the crowd. They trained endlessly, their bodies broken down and rebuilt as instruments of death. Some grew famous, their names shouted like legends. Others were forgotten before their blood dried on the sand. Imagine standing among them. You swear an oath to endure burning, beating, and death by the sword. That is the price of survival. The training was brutal. The schools were prisons. The only escape was victory or death. Trainers forced men into brotherhood, but also into betrayal. One day, the man you train beside might be the man you must kill. Whispers of Spartacus haunted every arena. The gladiator who rose in rebellion, who nearly broke Rome itself. His name lived on as both warning and inspiration. The crowd adored champions, but the price of fame was steep. Fighters could be ordered to kill friends, even brothers. Refusal meant execution. Survival meant living with blood on your hands. For most, the end was the same. Bones buried beneath the Colosseum, forgotten by history. And yet, the games would sink even deeper into cruelty, until entire arenas became rivers of blood. The sun sets over Rome, but the games do not end. The arena floor glistens, soaked red. The crowd is restless, hungry for more. What began as single combat escalated into mass slaughter. Prisoners of war, entire tribes, lined up on the sand, waiting for death. Some emperors ordered thousands to be killed in a single day. 5,000 men, some claimed, executed as if their lives were nothing more than numbers on a tally. The crowd cheered as rivers of blood flowed. To them, it was triumph. To the victims, it was annihilation. Ancient whispers suggest that emperors smiled as they watched entire peoples erase in hours. These were not games. They were warnings. This is what happens to those who defy Rome. But no empire can consume such blood forever. Even Rome's appetite would one day fade. The Colosseum stands silent. Weeds push through cracked stone. The sand that once drank rivers of blood lies untouched. Rome itself was changing. Christianity rose, preaching against the cruelty. The empire weakened, struggling to afford the endless cost of spectacle. Some whispered that morality ended the games. Others claimed the truth was simpler. Rome could no longer pay the price in blood or coin. The final games were shadows of their former glory. Less spectacle, more whispers. The great arena, once alive with screams and applause, became a monument to ghosts. And yet the Colosseum remains, a scar on the earth, a reminder of humanity's darkest hunger for entertainment. The sand is silent now, but the stories linger. The shadows whisper still. If you thought these games were brutal, wait until you hear what Rome did beyond the arena. Subscribe, leave your thoughts below, and join us for the next descent into forgotten darkness of history.